Conversation, Glenn Ignacio. He's a military expert, retired U.S. Air Force Special Operations Commander. Glenn, you heard that the U.S. president will go to Israel. That'll happen midweek. I'm just wondering what kind of security team they will need for something like that.
It's going to be monstrous. I mean, when I just heard that, knowing he's coming in on Wednesday, I sort of was shaking my head off air here, because the ability for Secret Service to be able to secure that area is just, it's monumental. The task is just monumental. If he just goes into a regular peaceful city in the United States, it's a monumental effort. For him to go into Israel when a lot of the people in even Congress and senators that have visited had run to the bomb shelters, that's a very dangerous thing to have a U.S. president do. And so my thing is, what would happen? I pray it never happens. But what happens if somebody is hurt? What happens if something happens to the president of the United States while he's in that combat zone? Makes me very nervous for the entire region, if not the world.
Yeah, it makes many question the timing. Antony Blinken is in Israel today. He had to go to a bunker with Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, because there was an air raid siren that went off. Luckily, nothing happened to either of them, but still, this is what's going on. Let's talk about the ground invasion, if you don't mind. What are the conditions that have to be met for Israel to launch this ground offensive?
Well, a variety of different things. First, they've been prepared the battlefield. That's something that we talked about, where they've used these airstrikes and artillery strikes to take out known resistance centers, command and control centers. So they've been doing that. At the same time, gaining a tremendous amount of intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. And you heard that they're using OSINT, or open source intelligence. That means using Facebook, using these cameras and everything that they just listed, to use as information of where Hamas may be headquartered, or where are people held up, or who are these people and their relatives. That's one of the things that they're doing. So they've done a pretty good job securing Gaza and completely containing that. And then the secondary threat is what happens to Hezbollah. Will they do something if they move into Gaza and they're securing the border there? So that's what's they're preparing for. Now, my understanding is that there's been some rain and some conditions that haven't been the best for operations. That's been one. That may be a delay. Secondly, is Israel, we could really capitalize on the evening, at the nighttime, because of their night vision capabilities that I believe Hamas doesn't really have, or if anything, it's very poor. So there's a variety of different things that have to line up. But as we said, the longer that it goes, the worse that it actually looks for Israel, because of the humanitarian conditions that are happening within Gaza.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a moment. You mentioned Hezbollah and the Lebanese border, and I'm wondering how much of a challenge that'll pose, because it could be a diversion for the Israeli military, and it could also mean some of their resources end up having to go in that direction.
You're absolutely correct. So, Gaza is that small area from 25 miles north to south, about 6 miles east and west as far as the size of it. But Hamas is only about 25, maybe 30,000 militants, terrorists that are involved in that. Hezbollah is part of the government within Lebanon and actually has 100,000 plus troops. So they are actually a bigger force. I was always concerned that if they get into Gaza, doing this military operations in urban terrain, which is what we're really talking about in the city environment, that can bog down forces, because they're going to have to be on the ground very slow. If they get bogged down and occupied, more reserves are going to have to go in there. And that would be something that Hezbollah could take incredible advantage of. So it's a very dangerous situation. It has to be balanced incredibly perfectly.
How does Israel do this, considering there are hostages, as many as 200, and we don't know where they are? How does that complicate matters?
It complicates matters because you don't know who is who. That's the problem. Is, first of all, is Hamas a terrorist? So you don't know who a civilian is. You don't know who a terrorist. So who's friend, who's foe? The second thing is there's a lot of hostages that have been taken, 120, 150 plus. So the idea of where they're located, that is an unknown. They could be in somebody's apartment. They could be in one of the tunnels. You have no idea. So the idea of hurting any other hostages, I believe, is secondary and is not really prevalent in the mind of the Israelis. They're going to do whatever they can to get the hostages out, either negotiating or even doing operations along the way. But the thing is that they are not going to hold back like they would anticipate as human shields, which is what Hamas has done many times before, even with the Palestinian citizens.
Yeah, it would also give, I guess, Hamas time to get its game together as it's defensive in Gaza. Also wondering why troops from Israel would target the north specifically. That's where they're asking the citizens of Gaza to move south. But wouldn't Hamas have resources or infrastructure across Gaza? Wouldn't they have to go through the Strip to really crush Hamas?
Yes, they would be completely separated, or I wouldn't say separated, but distributed through the entire Gaza Strip. But the biggest thing that's difficult is in the city environment is because of all the buildings, you have that threat from above you, not just at ground level, and now the tunnels underneath. So they're talking about North Gaza and Gaza City itself. So the population's about 1.5 million, and asking everybody to go south of the river, what they call the Wadi Gaza. That's what they're trying to do. And the reason for it is, again, this urban terrain is the most dangerous, deadly, and slowest operation they could possibly handle. So that's why they're using a lot of airstrikes and heavy hammered equipment and artillery to really hit that area. So the more that can get out of there, the more airstrikes and artillery they can use to destroy any particular stronghold that Hamas may have, and then move in there with the troops to keep the troops as safe as possible. But when I say safe as possible, that's still minimal because this is an extremely dangerous thing to do door to door.
So what are the resources that Hamas has, and how difficult will it be for the Israeli troops to target them?
Well, again, it's hard to disseminate who's friend and who's foe. So it's literally two people dressed just like me. One has an explosive vest, and myself, I'm fine. So it's hard to disseminate that. But for the last 2 years, it's been fairly quiet with Hamas. And they've, launched rockets occasionally into Israel. Now, that's not a small thing, but that's not a major operation like that just occurred. But they have a lot of supplies, weapons, and so forth that are stored in these tunnels. And the mapping of the tunnels is very, very difficult or minimally known whatsoever. So they have a lot of resources. They also have stored a lot of food and supplies to be able to contain that fight. So that's one thing that's unfortunate for the Palestinian citizens is they don't have the resources. They don't have food and supplies. And ironically, Hamas has given them the access to the tunnels to use even as bomb shelters in case of an attack. So Hamas is really holding up their own. They're the real problem, is that it really should be the Palestinians against Hamas and the Israelis against Hamas. Hamas is the problem. If we could focus on that, that would be a lot better for everybody.
Look, it sounds from the way you're describing the challenge and the complications involved in this that there could be large civilian casualties.
Unfortunately, yes. Let's pray that doesn't occur. We want to always hope for the best in this, but unfortunately, because of the situation that happens and how densely Gaza and the Gaza Strip is, it's hard to say that there's not going to be any. Even in the airstrikes that they've had to take over some of the or take out some of these command and control buildings that are known, there has been civilian collateral damage. It is the most densely populated area in the world. That 25-mile long strip has over 2.5 million people, and there's 1.5 million just in the North Gaza and Gaza City alone. So the ability to have no collateral damage is absolutely the worst thing possible. And something I mentioned before is, for every Palestinian that is hurt, it's not just taking out Hamas today, but everybody that is hurt, you're talking about a terrorist of tomorrow. So the idea of what happens after this engagement and this war is something Israel has to really think about is what is the post-war operations? What are they going to do afterwards? Not just today. It's a big, complex problem.
So, Glenn, the defense ministry said this won't be a quick hit. Is it likely troops will stay on the ground in Gaza?
Yes, I don't see how they can't. So what happens is they're going to have to literally move, as I said, door to door. And most of this is going to be from what we call dismounted troops. These are the folks that are going to be with rifles and the soldiers walking door to door, building to building, and clearing all these buildings. The other problem is with these tunnels, you might have Hamas pop out behind you when you never realized it or planned it. So it's a difficult fight. In addition to that is if they move through Gaza rather methodically, clearing the area, and these tunnels, again, being unknown and unmapped at this time, as soon as they go through an area, and if they don't keep it occupied, that literally could just go right back to Hamas where they fill in behind them. So there's, like I said, this is being done very smart in the planning process. Israel isn't just going to go full on, but these are the dangers that they have to fight, that they have to face in this really complicated battle area.
Yeah. Glenn Ignacio, great to have you on this. Thanks for joining us tonight on the show.
Absolutely. And let's hope for the safety of many in this upcoming battle.
Absolutely.